How much work is it to apply paint protection film to the back and sides of a Tesla Model Y compared to the front? That's the question I'm going to answer today, at least from my perspective being new to this. I just barely installed PPF 2 weeks ago on the front of our 2023 Tesla Model Y here behind me, and that was my first experience applying PPF to anything. I'll put a card above to the video I made of that installation experience. But in brief summary, the front bumper was the most challenging part to install, and there were some other learnings and nuances that I talked about in that video. Drive Protected has partnered with me again on this video, supplying their Defense Plus PPF for the sides and back of our Model Y for today's project. They haven't dictated anything I say in this video, so this is my honest experience and opinions. In my prior video, I washed the entire vehicle with the products supplied by Drive Protected in their application kit. Then I only installed PPF on the front of the Model Y. I've kept it here in my garage the last 2 weeks to keep it clean in anticipation of today's PPF application. For that reason, I'm not going to go through the wash process in today's video. If you want to see the washing process, then go to that prior video I linked to earlier. That being said, the car has acquired a little bit of dust in the last few weeks here in my garage, so I'm going to lightly spray it down, then wipe off each panel before applying the PPF. This is what the PPF looks like when it arrives, and you can see it was shipped in that box right there. And this is 4 separate rolls here, but there are multiple pieces in each of these rolls that you then have to cut apart with scissors or knife or something. So you can see up here, this is the hatch kit. So this is a 3-piece kit that goes over the hatch or the rear of the Model Y. And it says no red line because I don't have a performance Model Y. So that's where the red line would come into play. And then here it has the left doors, fender, and A-pillar. And then this one right here is the right doors, fender, and A-pillar. And then here is the rear bumper. And then it says no sensor because mine is a 2023 Model Y from December and there are no ultrasonic sensors on it. I have unrolled the right side door panels and A-pillar, and I just wanted to point out how this is laid out. So they have right front door as a sticker here, and then you can see the edge of the actual PPF right here. This used to be a full sheet of PPF, and they had a machine that cut it all out in a specific pattern, and then they've removed all of the in-between material. And so what remains is just the parts that we want. Over here is the right A-pillar, and you can see that piece of PPF is coming down along this way. So what I'm going to be doing is taking my scissors and cutting right here in between, making sure not to nick the PPF. I have finished cutting apart all of the pieces that were in the roll for the right side of the vehicle. So this is the 2 doors as well as the A-pillar. Now that A-pillar piece, I came over here and held it up to the car because I was like, that's really long. And you can see it comes all the way back here to where the rear hatch is, and it comes across all the way to the front to the base of the windshield. Now, the PPF that I've already installed was the full front end plus, and that plus is the side mirrors as well as this part of the A-pillar that came from here all the way up to right here. You can see that edge. And so I've already done that. If I want it to be one continuous piece, which I now have, I could just peel that off, or I could just go ahead and install it from the back to the front and then cut it off with scissors and just meet up that seam and then have a minor seam there, which I've found the seams are pretty hidden, so not a big deal. And if I do that, then if this PPF is ever damaged in the future, I'll have a spare that I can use. So I think that's probably what I'm going to do, and we'll see how it goes when I get going on that part of the install. The other thing I was going to point out that I need to do is back here you have the license plate holder, and so I'm going to take out those 2 screws and take that plate off. The size of this is T20 to take out these 2 screws right here. And then the other glaring obvious thing is if I'm going to be installing PPF along here, then these roof rails need to be taken off temporarily while I install that PPF. When Tesla installed these roof rails, they actually installed a little piece of PPF that is just underneath this base here. So I'm going to have to take off these roof rails and then peel off that little piece of PPF, the 4 of them, all the way around, and then I'll be able to install this PPF and put the roof rails back on. To remove this roof rack, it came with this tool when I bought it, and so you just insert that here on the back edge and then push it in along the edge here and then kind of force it up and it just pops it out just like that. Pretty simple once you know that. I tried it a couple of other ways and it didn't work initially, but just sliding it in there works great. And then once you've done that, you take the keys that they gave you, that they gave it to me with, and there's a key slot right here. So I'll bring this around so you can see that. And then you twist it to the left on this side and just twist it that much. pull it out, and then right here is this knob that you then can twist, and this is the screw, and you can loosen this that way. Just to give you an idea of what the PPF looks like from Tesla when they put the roof rack on, this is the size of it and the position of it. And you can see this is the bracket still in there that is there under the glass that's holding it on. So to remove this PPF, being that these are really small pieces, it doesn't look like I'm going to need to do much besides just grab it with my fingernail like this. And then I'm going to actually keep these just in case in the future they come in handy. So yeah, I can get the edge and then just peel it off like that. I've successfully removed the roof rails, and now I wanted to show that the side of the A-pillar PPF, I have pulled it all the way back to the edge here where it needs to go, and then up here I have marked it with where I need to cut it because the PPF is ending right here. But you'll see that I actually have two marks here and here. I found that when I measured it from the back to the front that it came to this mark, and when I measure it from the front to here, that it comes to this second mark. So clearly this PPF is meant to be stretched to fit in this space. And so I'm going to just be cutting it more like a third this way, because if you look at the length of the car, this is about a third of the length, and then there's about 2/3 of the length going in the rest of the direction. Now that I've gotten the car prepped with taking off the accessories, I'm going to rinse off the car, and then actually I'm going to be using the clay bar on all the parts of the car that I haven't yet clay barred. Previously I clay barred all of the front portions where I put the PPF on, and I never did the rest of it. So I'm going to be rinsing this off, making sure it's perfectly clean, and then I'll be putting on slip solution and going over it with the clay bar. Now the technique around that is to spray it, get it very wet with the slip solution, and then take a little chunk of clay bar and rub a portion of it, and then fold that in half so that the part that has been in contact with the surface of the vehicle is now folded onto the inside. And you just keep repeating that as you go over all of the surfaces of the car. Before I get started with clay barring though, you'll notice that there is a minor scratch right there. It's definitely going to be buff outable. And then there's actually another little bit one right here. Even though this Model Y is practically brand new, it has 1,200 miles on it, I assume that's scuffs from people walking past the vehicle. I'm going to go ahead and use some of this product right here to buff those scratches out before I apply the PPF, because then they'll be permanent at that point. And I've finished buffing the paint, and I'll scroll the focus across the side and you can see it looks all good. I have finished clay barring the whole side of the car, well, the two doors and the A-pillar up here. So you can still see some slip solution on the vehicle from doing that. So next what I'm going to do is going to dry off the car and then spray on the alcohol to make sure that it's a good and clean surface to apply the PPF. And you can see this right here is the 91 isopropyl alcohol I was able to pick up for this project. So I'll be spraying that on, wiping it off, and then I'll be spraying on more slip solution to begin applying the panels. And I'm going to do the front door and then the rear door, and then we'll just move on around the car. The trunk I'll do last actually. So once I finish this fender piece, then I'll do the A-pillar up there, and then I'll go and do the same 4 pieces on the other side. And then I'll tackle the back part, which I anticipate being the most difficult. I have finished applying the PPF panel to the front door here on the passenger side. You can see the edge of the PPF right here still. I've sprayed tack solution along the edge of that, and then I'm going to let it dry out before I start wrapping it around the end of the door. The rest of it, the PPF just goes right along the edge of the panel right here, and then along the front edge of the panel right here. But this was, as you might expect, a pretty easy panel to apply because the door does not have a lot of curvature to it. And what curving it does have, it's not a compound curve, so there was really minimal stretching, if none. Probably the hardest part actually is right here in this divot behind the side camera, but that's very easy to do. So now I'm going to move on over here to put alcohol on the door. Something I forgot to mention before is to put alcohol along the inside edge of the door, so that this is nice and clean to be able to wrap the PPF around this edge. You don't want to be alcoholing the edge of this when the PPF is already there, because if alcohol touches the adhesive on the back of the PPF, it will cause that adhesive to not work anymore. So I'm going to clean these edges and also the front face of the door with alcohol. I have now finished applying PPF to the front door and the back door. And with both of them, there's a overhang here, right, that I'm going to be wrapping around the edge of the door. And so I'm leaving the doors slightly ajar so that they don't touch each other, and I'm letting those edges dry out. And so you can see there's some edges here on the back as well. And then there's an edge along the bottom of this on both doors. I just finished applying the upper 2/3 of the A-pillar here. And this is the transition point right here. I don't know how well you can see that, but yeah, there's just a tiny line there. But I was able to butt up the new film against the old right here, and actually going like that, I can't even feel that it's there. But visually, I can see it just barely. Definitely only if you're looking for it. So I'm happy with that, how that turned out. And that's coming around all the way here now to the back part of the hatch. And so now I'm going to continue and install this back quarter panel. And once again, to make sure that alcohol doesn't get on the back side of this PPF that is drying out, I'm going to leave this door wide open so that the alcohol does not get on that PPF. So I'm going to clean this off and make sure to do all the edges like up here. I'm going to wrap, the PPF will wrap around in here. So I'll clean all this out and then we'll get that installed. I have now completed applying the PPF to this rear quarter panel right here. And once again, it has the edges right there that I'm letting dry out, and then I will be wrapping those once it's dry. This was definitely, it was harder than the doors. There is more contouring here, and there's more points to try to align all the way around it. I took my time though, and I was able to do it, I think, pretty flawlessly. It looks great. Now I'm going to go do the other side of the car and all of 3 of these panels. Now, one thing to take note about here on the A-pillar is the film is going right here to the edge perfectly, and width-wise it actually has enough to wrap around and go down the edge of the roof right there. So you can see there's a little bit of a lip. And just like I do the edge of the doors, I'm letting that dry out, and then I'll come back along here and work that down the side. I just finished installing the A-pillar here on the driver's side, and right here is the seam. Yeah, you can see it there, but when like on the other side, I run my hand over it, can barely feel this one. The other one I couldn't even feel. And so I'm pretty happy with that seam and how that turned out. And then of course, all across the back, it goes to the same spot on the back and also has the same little bit of overhang here that I'll let dry and then I'll fold it down later. And now I'm going to move on down to the driver's side front door. Okay, Lucy's gonna help me with this part, the driver's side door. So Lucy, what I need you to do is spray this slip solution all over the side of just the driver's door. Okay, so go ahead and spray here. Grab this edge that I'm handing to you right there, yep. Alright, that's a good amount.
That smells like shampoo.
Because it is, it's baby shampoo.
Oh.
Okay, go ahead and put it on the door.
Over here?
Yep. Don't let go. Make sure it stays there and doesn't slide down. Okay, so you see how it moves on the whole door?
Yep.
That's what we want. Okay, come over here and spray it right there. Lock. Okay, so that locks down that corner, right?
Yep.
So now let's lock down this other corner over here. Spray the film. You want to get the warm water on the film because that helps the, okay, that's good. It helps the adhesive to stick. Okay, so now we come back over here to the handle. Go ahead and spray around behind this handle. So then we get this lined up where we want it on the handle. So go ahead and spray on this corner. So that's good. We got that corner tacked down. And now we need to tack down this other corner over here. Okay, that's good. So like I said, the water cools down in the nozzle. So we want to get the warm water from down in the bottle out the nozzle, and that's what will make it activate better.
This is steaming hot.
Okay, so now we got all the important spots anchored, and now we just got to go systematically across the whole door, still making sure everything is lined up, but then squeegeeing it down. So then once we get everything tacked down, we're going to open this door so that I can now spray the backside of all this overhanging edge, and then we'll let it dry out before we come back and tack it down. So what did you think, Lucy?
Fun.
Fun? Was that easy or hard?
Easy.
Yeah, it can get hard, but it's generally fairly easy, I agree. Thanks for your help.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I'm going to do the rear door now, and Lydia and Clara are going to help with this. So Lydia, you're going to go ahead and start spraying off the door with a slip solution. And then I'm going to come over here, Clara, and I'm getting the PPF. Okay, can you see that edge? Pull that. Okay. Uh-oh, Lydia, spray this now. Okay, now pull back on that, Clara. Don't touch the car, back up. Okay, Lydia, spray that off. Okay, keep going. Spray it all off really good, Clara. Make sure.
That's for the handle.
Okay, I'm gonna come over this way. Okay, now Clara, place it here on the door. Spray the whole door across this whole thing, okay? So we have the slip solution on the inside, and you can see the whole door is moving. That's what we want. There's some overlap over here, so I'm gonna actually open up the front door before I get this in place. I'm gonna slide that over so I can open the front door. As a brief update, I just finished installing PPF on the rear door here, and then also the rear fender is complete. And so once again, just the same as the other side, the rear fender wraps around the other side, wraps around this corner right there. I found that the rear fender is probably one of the trickier parts about the sides of the vehicle, just because there's a lot of different points like there, that need to get all aligned. And because the body of the Model Y moves off to the side, there is some stretching necessary to get it to fit nicely, especially when you're going right here. It takes a little bit to get the excess material worked out and then stuck down so that it looks nice. Here you can see the edges of the door are still sticking out. I'm waiting for those to dry off, and then I'll wrap those around the edges of the door. And you can see there's excess along this back edge, along the bottom, and then along this front edge here as well. So I'm pretty happy with how that all turned out. And so the last part that I still need to do is the rear bumper and the tailgate. So I'm going to do that next. I just barely finished installing the rear bumper, which is actually almost entirely the sides. So you can see right there, it's that part, and it comes around over here to that peak right there. This ended up being, so far, the most difficult part on the whole Model Y that I've done. You can see it comes around over here. It's just this narrow little piece. It wraps around up here on the top edge of the bumper, and then it comes around over this way, and then it's that same piece on this side, of course. So because it's such a really long piece, narrow in the middle, which I guess doesn't really come into play all that much, the difficulty is getting this aligned appropriately. And there's a fair amount of stretching to do because you have to get over the contours of the bumper. So you're having to stretch the bumper tighter so that it will come in here. And this being concave makes it more difficult to get the PPF applied there and have it stay. And then getting it stretched all the way out here to this edge, both up here and down here, was just really, really difficult. And so I am happy with the end result, but it took me a while to do. Here is an example of the difficulty to rotate the PPF. So this is the bottom bumper here on the right side of this big portion. And if you look right here, it is slightly, the PPF edge is right here on the edge of my fingernail, right there. So it's farther in from the edge than it should be. And I knew it as I was, finishing it down here, and I was trying to pull it down, and it just stretched up, and then I was trying to get these other parts aligned, and it just ended up that's where it stayed. If I'd had more help, like if Jessica came out and was pushing down here while I was getting the other places tacked down, then maybe this could be better aligned. It depends on how much of a perfectionist you are. This is not going to be visible to anybody. No one is going to notice it, so it really doesn't matter. But as I'm going around scrutinizing my own work, that's one of the minor imperfections I found that was a difficult spot, because I did this side all by myself, and then Jessica helped me with the other side. I still haven't put down these corners because this is concave, and still there's a little bit of water there. And I've tried to get as much of the water out as I can, but I haven't gotten it all out yet. So I'm just waiting for this to dry, and then I will finish sticking that down. And over here, you can see this is a really difficult spot because the PPF is not only coming around this, but it's coming here. So there's excess PPF here on the inside. And then this is also curved in this direction. Getting the PPF hot with the heat gun, like I have this DeWalt heat gun here, is helpful. Just barely get it warm, don't melt it of course, and then stretch it around this bend here that's difficult. But like I said, this has trapped water here, so it's not sticking, so I'm waiting for it to fully dry out, and then I'll carefully wrap this around and stick that in there. And so I've gotten it all along here just fine though. So in general, the bumper was difficult. Make sure to have a helper on hand if you can at all. The edges finished drying off, and so I've now stuck those down, and you can see they came out quite nicely. It wraps around in that far. And like I said, this corner right here was actually a really, really tricky spot because you got the edge coming around. So I come from this angle. You got it coming down and then over. That's not too bad, but you combine that with this curve, and so you have to stretch the PPF quite a bit to get it to come around into this corner. The straight run across here wasn't too bad, and then of course this side repeated that difficulty. But I'm happy with how it turned out. It just was really hard to get all the fingers out of that spot. Now, the one place I was not able to mitigate all fingers, this is the corner of the trunk lid, and you can see it's a pretty tough spot. It's a really tight corner, tighter than the corners on the hood. And so there are little fingers left behind right there. And there isn't really excess material to cut off because you can see it's right along the edge of the folded sheet metal anyway. I used the heat gun, and that improved this a bit, and it helped make the PPF a little bit more pliable to push out some of those fingers. And I got them out mostly, and then they kind of come back. So I might come and work on this again in the future, but in general, this is a spot that it's at least out of the way and no one's gonna probably see it. But it's pretty hard to avoid fingers in this particular spot. Now I'm going to start working on the rear hatch. And so this is a 3-piece hatch. I'm gonna do this part next, and then that part, and then this top part. And there's a seam that goes right along here all the way around. So it'll be interesting to see how hard that is to do. I have now finished applying PPF to this section, that section, and this top part right here as well. So I have actually now applied all the PPF to the entire vehicle, and the last thing that I need to do is let these edges dry out here and then finish wrapping those around. But I've wrapped the edges around on all the other pieces everywhere else, including this piece right here, wrapping around this bottom edge, and then this piece as well, which wraps around here. Now, how did this turn out? This right here, what I found was that the Tesla logo appears to be slightly lower than what this template was cut out for. And in the videos, the instructional videos had mentioned, at least regarding this logo, that Tesla is notorious for having them inconsistently applied. And it apparently applies here as well. Because you can see I put the PPF as high above the logo as I could. So you can see there's a slight gap above it. And still, the edge of this PPF comes to right here, which is not as much at the apex as I think it should be. So I think it should be pretty much halfway right there, and yet it's down here. So that's not a very big tolerance, but what that means is this top part of PPF had to wrap around farther to meet the edge, and getting it to come around that far and then stay down was a little bit difficult. And you can even see, like right here, for instance, that it's coming back up a little bit, which is not going to be a big deal. You can see I can just run my finger across it and it sticks it back down. And I'm waiting for them to dry, and then they'll definitely stick down, or I can use a heat gun. It's a lot of bending, and when it was totally wet, it was hard to wrap it around and then also get it aligned and slip it so that it would butt up perfectly against the previous layer from down here. And so in general, this is a very long seam. You can see it starts over here on this side right there and goes along this all the way around to the other side. That's a lot of seam connecting, so it takes a long time to apply this top piece and get it aligned with this bottom piece. I feel like I did a pretty good job. As I go along here, I can barely feel anything for most of it, so I'm happy with that. There's a slight gap right in this section. I don't know how well you can see that, but it was tricky. It was hard to get it pulled down. It kept wanting to spring back up, and then getting it to get perfect to the edge and then stay there was tricky. So make sure you have good tack solution, distilled water, etc. That's good and hot, or at least really warm. And so, yeah, I'd say this piece overall it turned out good. I'm pretty happy with it, but it was time consuming to install, and definitely don't be rushed. It takes a long time to get all of these edges lined up, like I said. Overall, the question that I started out with is doing the back portion of the Model Y more difficult than the front? And my conclusion is that yes, it is. The bumper was the hardest part. And I think it might be harder than the front bumper because it has this big section over here that is connected by this narrow strip, and then the same big section on the other side. And so it's pulling that direction, but down low. So this whole portion over here is rotated that way. So I needed multiple hands to rotate it while I was trying to get the different points tacked down. So that was tricky. because if you just pull one point down and get it tacked, and then you go and pull up another portion, then this portion is now tacked in a slightly wrongly rotated spot. So getting that all correct was difficult. And then when you combine the bumper with this rear hatch, then now we're talking, this is probably more difficult than the front, because this is 4 pieces. You got the bumper, this piece, and then that piece. And then the fact that there is this long seam all the way across there makes it more difficult, in my opinion. And that's just the back I'm talking about. And then of course, in my particular project, I'm also doing the sides. So the 4 doors, right? All the way, and this fender piece all the way around. So there's just simply way more surface area that I did on this part of the project than when I did just the front, which the front had a lot of pieces, but a lot of them were tiny pieces, like the tow hook cover little round piece, or the fog lights, the headlights, the little 2 small pieces on each side of the lower part of the front bumper. And this back project included this A-pillar here as well. Due to just there being more surface area, it did take more time to do this back portion. But as far as difficulty level is concerned, I think that doing these 4 parts in the back is more difficult than the front. Your mileage may vary. They are fairly similar in difficulty, but that's if I had to pick, I'd say that this back part was more difficult. And just regarding the project in general, I'm obviously doing it here in my enclosed garage in February, so it's cold outside. And so in my case, what was very helpful was having this heater right here, which I have actually just plugged in to my NEMA 1450 outlet right there, which I normally use for charging my electric vehicles. And so that was very important to have. Otherwise, it would be too cold in here for applying the PPF, and then also just comfort level for me. So as a point of reference, if I come up here and look at my garage door opener, it's showing 75 degrees in here right now. And when I turned on the heater this morning, it was down in the 50s, and sometimes it gets down into the 40s, or even lower, just depending on the ambient temperature outside, of course. And so that has been very important to have for this time of year. And also, if I were to be doing this in the summer, it would be sweltering hot in here, and then I'd potentially put an air conditioner in the window over there to try to make it a little bit more comfortable in here for me. The thing is, you just don't want any doors open for ventilation to let the dust in. So you really need to have it closed, and then probably a climate controlled space, because this takes many hours to do. And then just a couple of other little tips. There are definitely times when you have to get down low and you have to kneel down. And so I have this pad, we just happen to have it around for patio furniture, and sometimes I would double it or triple or quadruple it up to get it thicker. And sometimes I was laying down on it. So it's really good to have a pad around. And then also, regarding the tack solution, this needs to be warm, or, I wouldn't say hot, but definitely pretty warm. And you want to be using distilled water for sure, and that's not going to be coming out of your water heater, right? So to get it warm, actually what I've just done is unscrew this top part, because there is metal in here, there's a spring. Take this out, and I've just been microwaving it. And with this full of water, about to here, maybe here, 2.5 minutes is a really good temperature, at least in our microwave. And then, put this back on, of course, and then continue with the installation. And this bottle cools down fairly quickly, especially if I have the bottle sitting down on the cement floor. So I've been actually reheating this pretty much for every single panel. So I'd get a panel complete, I'd leave the edges out to dry, go microwave this for another minute or so to get it back up to temperature, come back out, do another panel, and then do the edges, and then move on, etc. So that's just a couple of tips that I found. The microwave worked best to get this warm. This is the Johnson & Johnson baby shampoo that I use. This is from the travel section of a local grocery store, and you can see how much is left right there. I would say I used 2/3 of it, and I did the whole car with just this much. So that's just a point of reference for you there. And then I used this DeWalt heat gun. I've used this in the past for electrical projects to heat shrink, wrapping on cables and whatnot. And this really came in handy because, well, there are times where particularly difficult parts need to get heated at least just a little bit so that they stick better and stretch better as well. And so for edges and a bunch of other places, I use the heat gun, and it was very helpful. Another thing that is really helpful is really good lighting. Now in my case, I feel like I have adequate lighting. I wouldn't say I have fantastic lighting. You can see the brightest light is coming from over here, and this is just your standard shop light. I think it's 500 watts halogen type bulb. I've moved that around a couple of times over here to be on the side, or over here to be shining down on my work area, as I've been using this work area for cutting the PPF. Then the overhead lighting, well, and there's the garage door opener, but lighting, that's kind of worthless. It's pretty dim. And then I have 2 cob lights up here, one there, and those are quite bright. And I'll put links in the description below to all of the things that I'm using for this project. These are really bright lights in normal conditions, but when you're doing something like PPF, it's really helpful to have extra bright light. And I would not have minded to have probably 2 or 3 of these surrounding the car on all sides, pointing at it so I could really see the reflections better, to avoid leaving behind air pockets and spots of water or whatever imperfections. So that's just a pro tip. Make sure to have really good lighting. So overall, I am very pleased with this Defense Plus PPF, at least the installation process. The longevity of it is yet to be seen, and in future videos I will certainly be posting like when we're on a road trip, I will point out how well the car is being protected from rock chips and whatnot, from anecdotal evidence just out in the real world. And I'm definitely pleased just to have it protected here in my garage, for instance, because, well, you can see the kids have all these bikes, and usually the car is parked more that way, up against this side shelf over here. Right now I have it more over so that I can access it to do the PPF. But, when they are coming and going with their bikes and stuff and they have friends over, it can get chaotic, and I try to keep them out of the garage and just in the driveway, but they come in to get their bikes and whatnot. So it's really helpful to have PPF on the car, because as I've shown in the past video with our Model S, it's gotten some scrapes down the side, and I'm pretty sure some of those were from here in the garage, kids going past the car, coming in and out of the garage. And just in general, kids are hard on cars, and it's really comforting for me to know that it's got this PPF on here to protect it from the kids. It might even be something as simple as they were crawling into the back of the car to get into one of these back seats, and so this bumper surface area right here won't get scratched up. Things like that. And it's really nice to have for that. Between my last PPF video plus this one combined, I've wrapped the entire vehicle, which is equal to the full protection wrap listed on the Drive Protected website. The price for that kit is $2,635, but I've put a discount code in the video description below for 20% off, so you can save $527, getting it for $2,108. As a point of reference, I checked with a local installer here in Utah where I live who uses the STEK DYNOshield PPF, which has an equivalent 10-year warranty and also is 8 mil thick. And for them to install pre-cut panels just like these on the whole vehicle, they charge $5,500. If you want them to remove the emblems, garnishes, and other accessories to do a full wrap around all the edges, they charge $6,500. Being able to DIY this for just over $2,000 is clearly a significant savings if you're in the market for PPF on your vehicle and you're willing to put in hours of effort into the project. The quality of the application will obviously depend on your own abilities, but in my experience, having done this for the first time, I'm very pleased with the end result. Being able to watch Drive Protected's Training Academy videos was very helpful to approach it with an experienced method, and it worked out well for me. I wouldn't recommend attempting this project without a garage with good lighting that you can work in though. If you have any questions, feel free to post those in the comments below, and I hope this has been helpful as you make your own PPF decisions. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.